Tonight, as the stars shine softly outside your window and the world grows calm and quiet, let me tell you a peaceful story about a kind young queen named Esther and the brave choice she made to help others with love and courage. Esther was gentle, wise, and kind-hearted. It is here that Esther walks. Every morning, she moves through the paths with a measured, steady pace. She stops to brush dust from a stone bench or to adjust a drooping vine, her hands working with a patience that seems to slow the world around her. She does not rush. She does not shout. She observes the way the light catches the dew on the leaves and listens to the distant sound of the marketplace. People in the city know her by her quiet wisdom. They know that when she speaks, her words are chosen with care, carrying a weight of kindness that lingers long after she has passed by. She is a woman of grace, finding contentment in the simple act of tending to the life that grows around her. In this golden kingdom, she is a steady pulse, a gentle presence that brings a sense of order and peace to every corner she touches. The rhythm of her days shifted when the royal summons arrived. Esther moved from the open air of the gardens into the vast, echoing halls of the palace. Here, the floor was cool, polished marble, and the light filtered through high windows, casting patterns across walls that stretched far above her reach. She was surrounded by the weight of authority and the hush of servants who moved with bowed heads. Yet, the marble did not chill her, and the distance from the common streets did not change her gaze. Each evening, she walked the corridors to listen to those who stood at the gates. She did not seek the height of the throne or the attention of the court. Instead, she found the corners where the light was softest and the needs of others were most visible. She remained who she had always been, a person who listened more than she spoke. When she sat in the stillness of her chambers, she did not look at the gold around her. She looked at the faces of the people she served, keeping her heart anchored to the simple, quiet wisdom that had defined her long before she wore a crown. The palace was a new world, but she remained the same. The morning air was still, broken only by the rhythmic strike of sandals against stone. Esther was near the western gate when she saw him. Mordecai stood by the threshold, his posture rigid, his breathing ragged and shallow. He had traveled far, and the dust of the road clung to his skin, but it was his hands that caught her eye. They gripped the iron bars of the gate with such force that his knuckles turned white, and they would not stop trembling. He looked past the guards, his eyes searching the courtyard until they locked onto hers. He did not offer the usual greeting. Instead, he pulled her toward the shadows of the archway, his movements jerky and hurried. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a harsh, strained whisper that cut through the calm of the morning. He spoke of a plan, a shadow that had been growing in the dark corners of the kingdom, a design meant to erase her people. Every word he uttered stripped away the security of the walls around them. The news hung in the air, sharp and suffocating. The peace that had defined the palace for so long fractured in an instant, replaced by a cold, sudden weight that settled deep in the stone floors and the silent halls. The warning echoed against the inner walls of the courtyard, leaving a silence that felt heavier than the stone itself. Mordecai stepped back, his chest heaving, leaving Esther to grasp the gravity of the instruction. She looked toward the distant, golden doors of the throne room, noting how the guards stood with fixed, unmoving spears. The law of the land was absolute, carved into the very foundation of the kingdom. To enter the king's presence without a direct summons was a violation punishable by death. There was no room for mercy in those statutes, no exception for a queen who walked unbidden through those heavy gates. Every inch of distance between where she stood and the throne felt like a mile of sheer vertical cliff. She tested the weight of the decree in her mind. To speak for her people meant standing before the king, but to stand before him without an invitation was to invite an immediate end. Esther felt afraid, unsure, quiet. She felt the cold reality of the law press inward, narrowing her choices until only the most dangerous path remained. She wondered, what if I cannot do it? Have you ever felt nervous about doing the right thing? Esther felt that way too. Esther turned and walked away, her footsteps echoing sharply against the polished marble of the long corridor. She pushed open the heavy doors of her chambers and stepped inside, pulling them shut until the latch clicked with finality. The room was vast, filled with the scent of dried flowers and old parchment, but it offered no comfort. She paced the length of the floor, her boots clicking rhythmically, a rapid, uneven beat that betrayed her composure. She reached the far wall and turned, her fingers brushing the cool, smooth surface of the stone, tracing the intricate patterns carved into the rock. The air in the room felt thin, turning cold as the shadows lengthened across the floorboards. She stopped at the window. She began to pace again, faster now, crossing the room from corner to corner. Every movement was a struggle against the stillness. The silence pressed against her ears, thick and heavy, turning the air into something she had to push through just to draw a breath. She stopped in the center of the room, her hands clenched, listening to the sound of her own heart hammering in the quiet, empty space. The pacing stopped. Esther sank to the floor, her knees pressing into the woven rug beside her bed. Esther thought carefully. She prayed. She rested quietly. And little by little, her courage grew. She closed her eyes, shutting out the oppressive shadows of the room to focus on the quiet rhythm of her own breathing. One breath in, long and deep. One breath out, steady and measured. She held that stillness, letting the silence of the chamber transition from a weight to a foundation. She thought of the faces of her people, the vulnerability of their lives, and the singular responsibility she carried. The frantic pulse in her wrists slowed, evening out into a steady, rhythmic beat. She did not ask for the danger to vanish. She asked for the strength to walk through it. A subtle warmth returned to her limbs as the internal chaos surrendered to a singular purpose. She remained there until the tension in her shoulders dissolved, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. When she opened her eyes, the room was no longer a cage, but a starting point. She stood up, her movements fluid and purposeful, and turned toward the door. The decision was made. The fear remained, but it no longer held the reins. The sun had risen, casting long, sharp fingers of light across the palace corridors. Esther stepped out from her chambers and began the walk. The stone floor beneath her feet felt cold, a stark contrast to the heat rising in her chest. She moved with purpose, yet every step felt like a bridge narrowing under her weight. The halls stretched out ahead, immense and vaulted, the silence broken only by the rhythmic strike of her stride against the marble. She turned the corner toward the main gallery, her lungs pulling in sharp, controlled drafts of air. The walls seemed to draw closer with every passing yard. She reached out, her fingertips grazing the cool, rough texture of the pillars as she passed, seeking stability in the stone. Her heart hammered against her ribs, the shadows shifting as she moved, until the grand architecture gave way to the threshold of the throne room. She stopped before the heavy oak doors, the wood dark and imposing. She steadied her shaking hands. Esther placed her palms against the grain of the heavy oak doors. She leaned her weight into the wood. The doors groaned, a low, grinding sound that reverberated through the stone floor and died in the vastness of the hall beyond. She stepped forward, crossing the threshold from the dim corridor into the bright, sharp light of the throne room. The air here felt different, heavy with the scent of incense and the weight of absolute authority. She did not pause to look at the tapestries or the pillars. Her focus narrowed to a singular point at the far end of the room. The king looked up and saw Esther standing there, and instead of anger, he welcomed her kindly. The silence in the chamber became absolute, a physical pressure that tightened around her throat. She stood tall, locking her gaze forward, refusing to let her posture falter under the intensity of his scrutiny. Every muscle in her legs felt rigid as she held her ground, exposed in the center of the hall, waiting for the first word to break the stillness. Esther opened her mouth, the words catching in her dry throat before she forced them out. She spoke clearly, her voice gaining strength as she laid bare the threat looming over her people. She described the danger with precise, unvarnished detail, leaving no room for misunderstanding. The king remained motionless, his gaze fixed on her. Every second that passed felt like an hour. Then, the rigid line of his jaw began to slacken. He leaned forward, his hands resting on the armrests of the throne, the sharp intensity in his eyes softening into a look of recognition. He exhaled, a long, audible release of breath that signaled the end of the standoff. Esther watched his fingers tap twice against the wood, a rhythmic movement that broke the oppressive stillness of the room. He nodded once, a definitive gesture that echoed through the hall. The threat was acknowledged. Esther learned something beautiful. Being brave does not mean you never feel afraid. It means choosing what is right even when your heart feels nervous, replacing the cold air with the warmth of a decision made. She had spoken, he had listened, and the course of history shifted in that single, decisive moment. God helped Esther at just the right time. And God can help you too. Sometimes even small acts of courage can make a very big difference. Maybe sometimes you feel shy, or unsure, or nervous about helping others. But Esther's story reminds us, God can give peaceful courage. You can be kind and brave at the same time, and your choices can help others in beautiful ways. So tonight, as you rest peacefully beneath your blankets, imagine the peace she felt after choosing courage and kindness. The same God who helped Esther is watching over you tonight too. Let's say a little bedtime prayer together. Dear God, thank you for helping me be brave and kind. Please give me peaceful courage when I feel afraid. Help me sleep safely tonight, and bless my family with love and peace. Amen. Now, take a slow, deep breath. You are safe. You are loved. And God can help you be brave too. Good night, little one. If you enjoyed this peaceful bedtime story, don't forget to like, subscribe to Faithful Storybook, and come back tomorrow night for another calming Bible story.